Hello, and welcome to the Freight Flow Advisor Brief. Today's story is about one of the busiest ports in America. We're talking about Long Beach, and specifically, we're going to talk about this green truck corridor that they've been experimenting with. Because if this concept can work, it may create the outline for the next generation of port freight lanes. Now, if you're wondering what lane we're talking about, it's a 150-mile corridor between the Port of Long Beach and California's Central Valley, which already moves more than 300,000 containers a year. But now it's being wired up for zero-emission trucking with a 300-unit Tesla semi-order and a wall of charging infrastructure behind it. So today, I want to unpack why this matters for operators and shippers. And we're going to really take a look at where the leverage sits as these green corridors start to harden into actual network design. So let's start with what actually happened. The Port of Long Beach, the wonderful company, and Lincoln Transportation Services signed a memorandum of understanding to build what they're calling the world's first port-powered green truck corridor. Take a listen to this press release.
At the Port of Long Beach, the journey to net zero took a major leap forward with the signing of a historic agreement to create the world's first port-powered green truck corridor. Partnering with the wonderful Logistics Center and Lincoln Transportation Services, the clean truck route will connect the port to California's Central Valley, one of the world's most productive agricultural regions, while reducing emissions and improving air quality.
Our partnership with the wonderful Logistics Center is important. They have a 2,000-acre site where many of our importers and exporters currently do business. And by establishing a partnership with the wonderful company, we are essentially extending this green corridor from the nation's largest port complex to one of the nation's largest logistics centers in the city of Shafter.
Now, it's important to note that this lane is not theoretical. It already handles more than 300,000 shipping containers of imports and exports every year. Imports flowing in through Long Beach, agricultural and consumer goods moving back out of the Central Valley. Now, Lincoln Transportation Services steps in as the inaugural lead truck partner. They've ordered 300 Tesla semi-trucks and expect the first 50 to 70 units to start arriving around June. The semi is spec'd for long-haul range, but here it's being pointed first at a very intentional regional corridor. On the infrastructure side, the Port of Long Beach is already running 102 EV truck charging stations and expects another 92 to come online this year. The idea is to mirror that capability at the inland hub in Shafter so that both endpoints of the corridor can support heavy-duty charging and real operations. Port CEO Noel Asegaba summed up the ambition pretty clearly when the MOU was signed. He called it, quote, the world's first port-powered green truck corridor, and really framed it as a way to connect the heart of the U.S. agriculture with one of its largest port complexes while cutting air pollution on one of the country's busiest truck routes. Let's be blunt here. This is not just about emissions. It's about the control of freight flows on a critical port to inland lane. When you concentrate charging trucks and cargo commitments on a specific corridor, the game shifts from who has the lowest spot rate today to who has guaranteed access to the lane at all. Port of Long Beach moves over $300 billion in goods annually. The Central Valley generates around $40 billion in agricultural output. Now, when you tie these two economic engines together with a dedicated zero-emission corridor, it gives whoever can operate that lane reliably a structural edge. So listen, if you're a regional carrier or a drayage operator, the question is not whether you believe in electric trucks. No, the question is, do you want to be in or out of a lane where the port, a major inland logistics owner, and a lead carrier are aligning infrastructure and capacity? And for shippers, think about the big box names and food exporters that have already been cited as partners. This corridor gives them something they rarely get in trucking, a structured, cleaner service product on a high volume lane. And it's backed by long-term infrastructure investment. Now, we're early, but you can already see where this heads. Some lanes become green premium corridors with locked in capacity and expectations about equipment and emissions. Others become the default diesel network. And I think over time, procurement teams will start treating those as different products entirely. Now, as always, let's take a quick break to talk about Freight FA. Because if you're listening to this, you're probably already trying to answer a harder question than, is this corridor interesting? You're trying to answer, what does this actually do to my lanes, my pricing, and my network? And that's exactly why we built Freight Flow Advisor, our AI chat interface. It acts as your 24/7 AI freight analyst. Now, if you're wondering what it can actually do for you, you can drop in a lane, say Long Beach to your own inland node, and Freight Flow Advisor will walk you through rate expectations, mode options, and scenario trade-offs, and it will do it all in plain language. No more hunting through spreadsheets, no 3 tabs of rate tools open. And here's the best part. It's wired into the same engine that powers Freight FA's cost estimates, so you can go from what's happening on this corridor to show me a pricing range and how that compares to similar lanes in seconds. Now, this is especially important if you're building a budget trying to explain to your CFO why corridor premiums are creeping in, or just trying to decide whether to bid a lane at all. You can treat Freight Flow Advisor like a freight literate co-pilot. You can ask it for a bull, base, or a bear scenario. On pricing, we've kept it simple on purpose. There's a free tier so your team can get comfortable with our daily chats and quotes without pulling out a credit card. There are also paid plans that are priced so serious operators from regional fleets to mid-market shippers can actually use it weekly and not once a quarter. So look, if you're listening to this on the road or in the office, just remember freightfa.com. And when you get there, click on Freight Flow Advisor. Ask it about your top 3 corridors and see what you can learn. All right, let's pivot back to Long Beach because I want to talk about how you should actually think about this corridor if you're running a fleet, managing procurement, or even allocating capital. First, you have to remember that this is a lane-specific electrification strategy. It's not a blanket fleet conversion. California regulations are pushing ports and drayage towards zero emissions by the 2030s. But the way it will actually show up is through corridors like this, where freight density and infrastructure justify the early move. Now, if you're a carrier, the move is to identify which of your core lanes resembles that Long Beach to Shafter lane. Think dense, repeatable, with anchor customers and some line of sight to either charging or fueling infrastructure. Those are the lanes where electric or alternative powertrains might pencil out sooner, especially if you can negotiate a long-term commitment with shippers who really care about emission scoring. Second, inland logistics hubs are quietly becoming the leverage points in this story. The wonderful logistics center in Shafter isn't just a big warehouse park. It's an inland node that's being built out with charging, rail adjacency, and export connectivity. The more those modes mature, the more they start to compete with traditional coastal distribution zones for both volume and capital. So I want to talk about where I think this is heading. I think in a traditional bull scenario, the first 50 to 70 Tesla semis come online, the charging works, the lane runs relatively smoothly, and shippers start treating green truck corridors as a real product that draws in more volume, more partners, and gives the model enough credibility to replicate at other ports. In a base case, it's a measured rollout. The corridor works for structured freight, but scaling remains constrained by truck supply, charging windows, and some very real operational complexity. It becomes one important proof point, but not a full system reset. Last, in a bear case, utilization proves harder than expected. Charging bottlenecks show up at the wrong times, route timing doesn't match ship arrivals or export windows, and the economics look soft compared to well-run diesel operations. The corridor exists, but adoption slows and people get more cautious about corridor-centric electrification. My view, the structural direction is clear. Ports and inland hubs will keep building these corridors because they solve multiple problems at once: air quality, ESG pressure, and long-term competitiveness. The open question is who uses them well. The fleets and shippers who win are going to be the ones who treat these corridors as traditional design problems, not PR problems. They're going to be the ones who run scenarios and understand cost curves. They're going to adjust network planning, not just within their press releases. And that's why tools like Freight Flow Advisor matter, because you can't navigate this kind of structural shift with a gut feel and last year's spreadsheet. You need a tighter feedback loop between what's happening on the ground and how you bid, route, and invest. Thanks for tuning into our show. If you liked it, feel free to share with a colleague. Also, remember to subscribe to the Freight FA Brief on Substack, and you can listen to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And last, don't forget to check out freightfa.com, where you can get live market intelligence and up-to-date rate estimates 24 hours a day. Until next time, this has been your Freight Flow Advisor Brief.